Chapter 3. The End. Weather on the plains was funny. For the most of it, populated areas had weather that was monitored and controlled by the Pegasus Committee, and as a result, problems were kept to a minimum. But the Pegasi didn't fly this far out to the middle of nowhere, where the ground looked dry, thirsty, and cracked from the lack of moisture. It was only due to rough clouds like these, which were more common than one would think, that the planes got any rain at all. They flew around roughshod and unguided, being pushed around only by the wind. It was only when they flew close enough to a settlement to cause alarm would the weather Pegasi take care of it. The cloud had only just made a pass, but already the ground was once again dry and crumbly under Applejack's hooves. The soil sucked it up and drank heavily of it, happy to be refreshed after weeks of naked sun. Applejack hoped that their disappearance had been noticed by the ponies on the train, although it was rather unlikely. Once their tickets were punched, for the most, there was no further monitoring required. They certainly didn't take care to note who had gone off the train. At the very least, she hoped Rarity's insane amount of luggage would have caused some heads to turn at the Ponyville station, and hopefully some pony would remember and wonder why all that luggage wasn't there at Dodge. But it was a stretch and a humble bunch of wishful thinking. If she remembered correctly, the next train from Ponyville to Dodge was in 2 days, which meant at the very least it would take 2 days for her friends to realize something was wrong and come looking. Twilight would probably ask the questions, investigate what might have happened, and come to the conclusion that they had dropped off the train during the breakdown. Pinky would spark the others into action, eventually zeroing into the most logical choice of what to do, accompanied by shouts and screams. And Rainbow and Fluttershy would scour the area and spot them from a mile away. That was the most likely scenario. Perhaps she was wrong, perhaps some help was on their way right now, but she had to prepare for the worst. The cloud that was circling the perimeter of the town didn't make it any better. It was never safe to be out during a thunderstorm, and this one was as ferocious as they came. It crawled along the outer rim, displaying its teeth, ready to jump back in at any time and endanger anyone foolish enough to stand beneath. It was for that reason that Applejack gathered as many plants and fruits as she could, stuffing her bags full of nourishes flora, and carried them back to the hut. By that time the sun had already made its way across the sky, and it was long past midnight. To be fair, she had taken as much time as she could afford. She was still feeling the after effects of yesterday's altercation. Applejack was one who wasn't that easy to anger, but was also one who found it hard to return from her voyages into extreme temper. It was a mix of her inbuilt stubbornness and unwillingness to forgive her own behavior. It simply troubled her in a vicious circle, in which her own annoyance at herself caused everything around her to set her off more easily than it normally would. But the ever-present looming of the cloud had meant she needed to cut her brother short and return to the hut. It was time to face down her dread and head back to Rarity. Somehow Applejack knew that there was going to be something waiting for her when she returned. Somehow she knew that she was going to have to face a truth that she didn't want to. Or was that couldn't? Was there a difference anymore? It had been so long that it was hard to tell, but each step became harder than the last, and that look upon her face showed all the more signs of struggle as the tiny little horse loomed into view. As she approached, she almost considered staying outside, and as she entered, her heart sank. Her heart sank at the gorgeous sign that unfolded before her. Her heart sank at the candle that sat lit in the middle of the boxes in the center, except that they were now at table, weren't they? What with the white linen sheet stretched across the top? Her heart sank at the 2 trunks that she had placed against either wall, except now they were beds, covered with layers of random clothing and topped with a small throwing pillow each. Sure, they would be a squeeze, but they were definitely far more comfortable than the floor. Her heart sank at the water building. In a pinch, Rarity was just as good at repairing as Applejack was. After all, mending clothing was far more technical than mending a hole in the wall, and the only reason why Rarity didn't do it more often was just because she didn't want to get her hooves dirty. The candle flickered as the cloud billowed above, like a rushing wave traveling across the sky, plunging the day into night. And immediately it brought the rain, which stayed outside. And behind it all was the pony for whom her heart sank the most. She stood there, perfect as ever, in a frilled dress, studded with black stones, and bordered with fancy lace. It was glossy, gossamer thing, and showed off Rarity's assets perfectly in compliment. Applejack finally remembered to breathe. "Well, Applejack," Rarity trilled triumphantly, "what do you think?" "Oh, Rarity," Applejack whispered sadly, "why would you have to do this?" The sound of rain, at first sounding like paper being torn, but then later billowing up into low-toned static, tore through the hut, as the candle flicked in the gently moving air. "Damn it, damn it!" Teeth grind against teeth, while Applejack's brow furrowed into channels of stress and frustration. "Applejack," Rarity pressed forward. She could see Applejack's reaction clearly, but she had come too far. She sacrificed too much. "I need to tell you something." Applejack shook her head, frowning at her companion. I have made a gift for you, and," Rarity said, her voice losing confidence by the second. Her subtly wavering tones degraded into pale shameless of their former self, and she ended up sounding like a choking bird. A small package wrapped up in spotted paper and tied with a huge bow was lowered to the space between them. Applejack pushed it away. "I'm begging you, don't. I know what you're going to say, and I'm begging you." "I have to," Rarity yelled, throwing the package down onto the table. "No, you don't," Applejack shouted back. "I know what this is about, and please, I'm asking you, for both of our sakes, please don't say it." "Applejack," Rarity stated, drawing in her last breath and holding firm, her tone dropping to a harsh vocal imprint that echoed in the rain. "Rarity," Applejack sighed. She was beaten. "Applejack, I love you." The words rang in her ears, and she shut her eyes up tight. But even then, the flickering candle kept throwing shadows at her from out of the corner. She placed a hoof across her face, in a vain attempt to stop her head from splitting open. "Please say something," Rarity asked, rage breathing passing over dry lips. "Please." But all that came to reply her was the water floating off the roof. "Please," she repeated, "please." "What do you want me to say?" screamed Applejack, lifting her head and staring so deeply at Rarity that she jerked her head back in shock. "You think you can just say things like that and what? What were you even trying to do?" Rarity muttered in shock. "Did you really think this was the best time?" Applejack kept yelling. "After all the menu you put us through. After all you did." "Applejack, please," Rarity begged, desperation creeping around the edge of her tone. "No," Applejack shouted. "Don't give me that. There ain't anything you can say. Anything that's gonna explain yourself." "But I know you have feelings for me too, Applejack," Rarity pleaded. "I just wanted it to be special for when I had feelings, Rarity. I don't anymore." Above, a shadow of thunder carried through the hut, charging the air with a flash of light and shaking the foundation of the building. Rarity blinked, not fully realizing the depth of what Applejack had said until she had said it again. I don't love you anymore, Rarity," Applejack said, lowering her voice in a pale defeat. They were the words that both of them didn't want to have been put out. Even Applejack, for declaring it, suddenly made them more real than all the time she had said it to herself in her head. At least while they existed in her mind, they could be still denied by some part of her deep down. But now they were out, heard and real. I don't love you anymore, Applejack whispered, her eyes feeling heavy. Rarity's head began traveling. The ever-present smile that she usually put on had long gone, and all that was left was her roaming eyes and shaking hoof, as it came up to her mane almost instinctively to push it out of her face. But even then, all it did was to upset it, as the strands of her hair came loose to fly free and out of control. "Why?" Rarity asked the floor meekly. "Because you ain't the pony who I fell in love with no more," Applejack explained, shaking her head. Rarity didn't say another word, sufficing herself to keep staring at that one spot on the floorboards. "I don't know who you are anymore, and you don't know who I am," Applejack continued, and that's the length and the breadth of it. "Of course I know you," Rarity cried, "and surely you know me. We've known each other for years. Applejack, how could it be any different?" "Yeah, that just proves that you don't at all. I have been paying attention. I know you knew I fancied you back then, but over those last few months, you didn't notice that I stopped, did you? Used to be you're just a prissy fashion queen with a bit of haughty streak. We all knew you were just acting like that. Now, you changed, Rarity. Changed into something I don't recognize at all." Once again, Rarity kept looking down. She knew exactly what Applejack was talking about. But yet, as the thought traveled throughout her mind and to her lips, she found herself saying something completely different. "I haven't changed," Rarity declared softly. "Stop it, Rarity, just stop it," Applejack sighed, face scrunched up. "That's just the thing. All the stuff you say, all those things you do. If you knew me at all, you wouldn't know I don't care for none of those things. I hate you all running around and evasion and all your pointless talk. I hate how you ain't never sorry for a thing you did in your life. I hate your fakeness, Rarity. That ain't what I like about a pony, and it occurred to me you ain't gonna like a pony who ain't your kind neither. You ain't even apologized for stranding us out here. In fact, you ain't ever offered a simple explanation as to why you were so plumb stupid as to leave the train in the first place. I did it for you." Rarity suddenly burst out, her turn to let loose frustration. Applejack didn't even flinch. She was too tired too. "I did it for you, okay?" "How was any of this for me?" Applejack cried out in frustration. "I wanted this to be perfect. I just wanted it to go perfectly for you. My mane was upset in the train and I needed a mirror. There weren't any on the train, so I left. How was I to know that the train would be fixed so fast? How are you to know? That ain't even the point. The point is you don't go running off. Do you even have a single considerate bone left in your body?" Rarity stamped the ground in frustration, but to whom the frustration was for was unclear. "I don't care about your mane, Rarity. I don't care about all of this. I don't care about makeup or dresses or how nice the room is. I don't care that you have a fancy present in the nice wrapping. It don't suddenly make things better. You just can't act the way you want all the time and expect other ponies to be okay with it later." Rarity muttered. "Say you're sorry. Admit you're wrong." "I don't act like that," Rarity defied, a small tear running down her face. "That's it," Applejack shook her head. "I can't take it anymore, Rarity. I'm sorry. But there ain't ever gonna be anything between us. You ain't the same pony no more." Suddenly panic returned as other thundering crash rocked the skies above. It was the same panic that threw Rarity every time she fell in danger. It was the same panic that controlled her. But this time it swung her in the opposite direction. "No, Applejack, please. Okay, I'm sorry, alright? Please, just give me another chance, Applejack. I'm sorry for leaving the train. I'm sorry for how I acted," Rarity begged, frantically, stuttering over uncontrollable breaths. She pushed past the table unsteadily, bumping into it as she approached Applejack. Applejack moved away. "Please, I'm sorry." "And you think I can believe that?" Applejack huffed. walking back around to the other side of the table and facing away. No, I can be whoever you want me to be. Just tell me what it is, Applejack. I can... No, you can't, Applejack spat out. You can't just be who I want you to be. You either are or you ain't, and you ain't. You can be whoever you want to be right now. It doesn't matter anymore. Just be the one who shows up their friends at the most important competition of their lives. Just be the one who steals gems away from baby dragons. Be the one who chases away her own sister. Your own sister, Rarity. You know who I fell in love with? It was that pony long ago, who stayed up all night making dresses for the 6 of us, just because she was kind enough to do it. And now you can't even make Twilight a birthday present because you're so wrapped up in your own business. And you didn't even have the guts to tell the truth about it. It's pretty obvious to the rest of us who you want to be. And you know what? The one I fell in love with is gone. So you know what? I just don't care anymore. When Rarity looked back up, her heart couldn't help but clench at the sight of Applejack, wiping streaks of tears away from her eyes. It was the truth that hurt the most, and through those tears did Rarity realize that nothing Applejack said had been easy, and therefore it had been nothing but the truth. You are useless, once again failing at everything, causing problems because of your greed and your selfishness. It's no wonder that you aren't loved. She probably never loved you in the first place. Rarity shook her head, clenching her eyes tight to drive away the phantoms. But she couldn't hide behind a laugh any longer. The smiles just wouldn't come out. Yeah, that's right, little Rarity. All alone as usual. Useless filly. Never once could you stand by yourself. Why not just pretend like nothing's wrong? Like you always do. Why not just indulge in yourself like you always do? That always makes you feel better, doesn't it? Hiding, that's all it had ever been about. Each disgraceful action leading to the next. All in an attempt to hide. Look, see how you broke her heart? Look at what you have done. Applejack stood there, trying to keep a brave face. But with every blink she gave, more and more tears ran down. And those tears told the whole story. How are you ever going to get out of this one? Rarity, you selfish. Rarity took a step back, not understanding what she was doing. And then she swung around, wrenching the door open without a second thought. Her mind had emptied itself from everything except the words that kept shouting at her. And Rarity tore through the wind and the rain, pushing out into the fall, and despairing into the darkness, all in but a flash. Rarity! Applejack gasped, turning around at the sound and scrambling towards the door. She winced as she came down hard upon her injured ankle again, but flew out the opening in an effort to keep up. And for the second time in those 2 days, she was on the chase for her friend, who had taken off without a single word of warning. Each drop hit so hard that it hurt, especially the ones that pelted her in the face and the eyes. The scattered dust got into her nose and throat, and the dump only made it harder to read it from her face. She put her ragged Stetson down a bit more, but the brim was already wavering in the wind, and the rain poured through the holes. And while it could keep a bit of the wet out of her eyes, it wouldn't help if she was struck by lightning. The bolts came every few seconds. Not all of them hit the ground. Most of them were content jumping around inside of their host. But one might, at any time, and they were likely to hit the tallest thing standing up on the flat plains. "Rarity!" Applejack shouted again over the storm, as the howling pushed both her words and her body aside effortlessly. But she had to walk, she had to press on. The cold of night helped to relieve some pressure off her swollen leg, but it still prevented her from running at full speed. All of her strength was put into fighting back the storm. And she trudged onwards, not bothering to yell any longer. There weren't many places to run off to in this settlement, and most of them were incredibly dangerous indeed. But with a limited number of choices, Applejack made a guess and pushed towards the pound. Like a world shrouded in veils, the darkness only lifted in a small area around Applejack. Everything else was impossible to see past a certain distance. But as she approached her destination, a familiar ghostly figure was revealed by the side of the pond, soaking wet and immobile. Applejack stopped for a moment, a foolish gesture driven by instinct. And suddenly did Rarity move, swiftly and viciously. Applejack saw her silhouette grab at the lapels of her dress and tear at it, pulling as much as she could, and even using her magic to finally rip it off her back. It was no easy feat, especially that it now had been drenched right through. She threw it to the ground and stamped on it, yelling inaudible threats against the horrible thing, before finally flinging it into the pond, where it was swallowed by the bubbling darkness. Her head fell over, plastered to her head in strands that stuck together, and in the frequent explosions that came from above, Applejack saw her rub at her face, hard, fast, as if she were trying to claw it off. She held her hoofs to her head, and finally laid down at the water's edge, curled up in a weak, pathetic ball. The thunder that crushed shocked Applejack back to life. She blinked as the image finally cleared in her mind, and she tore forward again, pressing past the curtains of rainfall and landing on top of Rarity's back. She had to. Keep low was important, and it was the only way her voice could penetrate the insulation of weather. "Get off me!" Rarity screamed, struggling and slipping along the bank into the pond. "Rarity! You have to come back! You're gonna get out of the storm!" Applejack pleaded, curling a leg around her neck and yanking her out of the water. The ground ran with mud. "Just leave me!" Rarity wailed, too far lost in her emotion to make any sense. "I have nothing left. Let me be. You're gonna die out here, Rarity. So be it. Rarity, come back and let's talk about it, alright? Please!" A bolt of lightning flashed in the sky, followed by a rumbling that was directly overhead. It shook the ground and caused Applejack to duck out of terror. "Rarity! No! You hate me!" she sobbed, lowering her head back into her legs. There was no time, there was no argument. Applejack, fighting against her injured leg, fighting against the struggling form of Rarity, hefted her up onto her back, where she lay there like a stuffed doll, finally giving up her resistance and letting Applejack have her way. And step by agonizing step, she carried Rarity back to the hut. Applejack deposited her onto the ground, roughly, panting from a lack of breath and lack of air. She could have drowned on the way back with how heavy the rain was, and it was only through an absolute stroke of luck that they weren't injured by lightning on the way home. All Rarity could do was cover her head, sopping and wet, with her front legs and curled up into a ball. Applejack, too, dropped to her knees to take that chance to rest, where she landed heavily behind Rarity. For a moment, all she could see was the unrhythmic rise and fall of Rarity's shoulders as she breathed. The open door had put out the candle while they were gone, and they both lay there in darkness, neither speaking nor moving. But she had to be the one, didn't she? She had to take the first step. It was the right thing to do, the honorable thing to do. At least Applejack knew how to follow through when she felt guilty. "Listen, Rarity," Applejack finally said, after a few moments of gathering up her confidence. "I'm sorry about what I said just now. I guess I was just angry." The puddles of water that flowed off their bodies drained down the floorboards. "I mean, I was really mad, Rarity. Not on purpose, but I'm really confused too. I really did used to have feelings, and it just hurt when I had to hear those words coming from you. I just reacted badly. I just wish..." Applejack cut herself off. There wasn't anything she could really say at this point. Nothing she said would change anything. I mean, what could she wish for? That Rarity had said it earlier? And then what? They would have gotten together, and it would have hurt even more that she would change in front of her. What else? She could wish that Rarity hadn't changed this much, but in the end, she just had. And that was the end of that. Wishes were just that, wishes. They never came true, and you can't change the nature of a pony. The voice that came after that short pause of silence came as a surprise in how different it sounded. There wasn't a sing-song quality to it. There were no melodic chirps or accentuations. There was just Rarity, weak, sad, and thoroughly lost to herself. I know, the voice said, from the shadowy figure that lay just in front of Applejack. It was Applejack's turn to deny a response. I know I have been changing, said the voice, with a level of purity stripped of all farce. That's why I needed you so badly. Me? Applejack said. Yes, I suppose it's silly now to think about it. But you were always the one I wanted to be. You wanted to be me? In a way, I suppose. I don't understand. I'm sorry. Rarity shifted slightly, pushing her face a bit deeper into her legs. It made her a bit more muffled, but no less honest. It's why I like you so much, Applejack, she said, the tears in her voice apparent. I just... You're always everything. I wasn't. I couldn't. I just knew. Applejack looked towards her hooves guiltily. She wasn't sure why. Oh, Applejack, I'm so sorry, Rarity sobbed. I have been an absolute beast. Nah, you haven't, Applejack replied, answering from her heart inside of her mind. Yes, I have. I know I have. I have always known. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay. I thought I felt comfortable. Applejack pondered on this for a while, the moments passing before she finally decided to ask. What do you mean? With you, Applejack, I felt comfortable with you. Only when I was around you, I felt brave. I felt confident. Because you were. Because of how truthful you are. I need you, Applejack. You're kind and loving and everything else I wish I could be again. I know I made such a mess of things. I know this is all my fault, but I needed tonight to go perfectly. Because if it didn't... What, Rarity? What would happen? I mean, what do I do now? Without you, I don't think I can ever improve. Rarity, that ain't a good reason to love some pony. Don't you get that? You can't just love me because I'm some pony you want to be. It's more than that. It's about understanding the other one you want to be with. It's about knowing the one you love. Pretending just ain't good enough. And that's why it ain't gonna work out. I don't know who I am anymore, Applejack. I don't know the pony I'm turning into. And without you, what do I do now? You just get better. You don't need me for that. Like I said, that ain't the reason why two ponies should get together. We will help you. All of us will. But maybe a relationship just ain't gonna work out. The hiss of rain continued to shower over the roof, and there in the near pitch darkness, they both fought back the cold. But I still want it, Rarity said sadly. I still want it. Why, Rarity? I don't know. The door creaked, fighting back the wind. Rarity? Applejack asked after a pause. Yes? Can I see your face? Why? I just want to. Please. Let me just look at you for a while. Rarity didn't stir. She didn't move to reveal herself, but didn't oppose Applejack, when she gently lay a hoof on her shoulder and rolled her around. Her pale white face, now free from makeup, looked away from Applejack, eyes averted in some kind of shame. Her mane pressed flat against the sides of her face due to the wetness, and she looked no one iota less plain than any other pony to be found anywhere in Ponyville. Applejack bit her lip. Rarity blinked, a long blink. Her eyes remained shut for a few seconds before they fluttered open again to reveal her perfect eyes, unframed by false lashes or her traditional blue mascara. A stone was cast down Applejack's throat, and it landed neatly upon her heart. It weighted down with 1,000 tons, and once again she found herself wishing for things that wouldn't happen. The pale white beauty face turned, saddened, burying itself once again behind a cage of legs. "Why?" Applejack would have asked. "Because I can't bear for you to see me this way," Rarity would have replied. No words were said, none were needed. The actions and the sentiment were clear. Applejack knew that Rarity still didn't get it. It was that mascara-free face, those pure eyes, and that innocent expression that Applejack wanted most of all. And it was those things that Rarity thought she hated. It was that one instinctual need to hide that part of herself away. In that, Applejack knew that the Rarity she loved would always be hidden. "Is there really nothing between us?" Rarity tried, one last time, muffled words through her tear-stained flesh. One last time did she attempt, one last time did she ask, and one last time did Applejack shake her head. "I'm sorry," she repeated. "I just don't think you know who I am." Rarity nodded, no longer troubled by it. She would hit that point where she just wanted to confirm it again, and she didn't feel burned by the answer. "Then we should get some rest," Rarity said, pushing herself up to her hoofs. I prepared a bed for you. You may use it as you wish." The unicorn walked to her own trunk, full of dresses and shirts and padding that stood in for a mattress. It was rather spacious, and Rarity found no trouble in huddling up against the far side, burying her head in the swath of cloth. Applejack just stood there watching, looking at Rarity as she climbed in, thinking of things as she huddled up with herself. Theirs were two lives set apart. It was a strange sort of circumstances that caused them to miss each other coming down opposite direction on the same road. Perhaps if she had been part of Rarity's life a little earlier, or perhaps if Rarity hadn't changed, maybe they might have collided. Applejack wasn't against the idea. She would have loved to be in love once more. But if Rarity only wanted her because of arbitrary reasons, that wasn't real. There wasn't anything about this that was real. Not the mistake that caused the mess to this room they were in. Not the presentation given earlier to the kerchief that Rarity had tied around her ankle. Everything was dressed in fraudulence and fakery. And just as Applejack had said earlier, there was one truth that she believed in. You can't change the nature of a pony. Rarity had gone too far and lost too much. The burden of herself had wrapped her into who she was now, and there was no going back. This truth was what hurt Applejack the most, and she wished for some trace. She wished for one sign. It was Applejack's turn to reach for the answers she already knew. Not a single trace of the old Rarity was left. Not a single piece remained. Oh, but how I wish they were! At her hoofs lay the present that Rarity had given, in its obscenely bright wrapping paper and its goldly bow. Applejack kicked at it. At the very least, maybe. She picked it up and put it on the table, the soft paper rustling as she placed it there and stared at it. Well, it was the thought that counted, Applejack supposed. She dug into the package, tearing off the paper, and taking full view of what Rarity had given her. And for a minute the rain took over her world. Applejack? Rarity asked, in the darkness, the showers from above cascading down. What? Applejack replied. Are you crying? No, you idiot! I ain't crying. She couldn't finish her sentence. She had already taken the necessary few steps toward Rarity, and without even thinking, pushed her roughly aside, forcing herself onto the narrow bed. And she threw her legs around her friend, as silent tears fell upon Rarity's cheek. What's wrong? Rarity whispered, laying there in the darkness, too stunned to move. I made a wish, Applejack burst out tearfully, burying her face into Rarity's shoulder, her words intermingling with heartfelt sobs that came from the deepest part of her heart. On the floor lay the hat that Rarity had made. It was a plain, simple hat in brown leather, exactly like what Applejack wore, and exactly how she liked it. It was a full representment of the worn-down old tattered hat that she currently had, and not a single thing was changed in the design. You couldn't change the nature of a pony, not at all, and perhaps Rarity hadn't. And in that, Applejack held Rarity tighter, sniffing, and soon Rarity joined in too, not even needing a reason why. Together they lay, shaking and shuddering, and crying over laughs, not speaking a word, but each completely understanding what they were trying to say. And in each other embrace they stayed until the tears finally ended. 2 days later. The speck turned into a tiny bit of blue, and that tiny bit of blue turned into Rainbow Dash. Her multicolored trail was easily recognizable, and before she even reached the town, Applejack and Rarity had already seen her. Rainbow must have seen them too, as she slowed and banged down, flying past houses with finesse, and depositing herself straight onto the dirt right in front of the pair. There you are, Rainbow exclaimed. We have been looking for you for ages. Lady Jubile told us you have never arrived, and the train ponies didn't remember ever seeing you two leaving the train. So Twilight checked out the train roster, and guess what? She noticed your train broke down and figured something must have happened. Applejack quirked an eyebrow, smiling to herself. And... Dash went on, landing next to Rarity and Applejack. That's weird. Rarity was wearing Applejack's hat. She never did that. And then Pinky started yelling about finding you because you might be starving or dead or... Sounds about right. Applejack chuckled, giving Rarity a kind of glance, who responded with a titter of her own. And so Fluttershy and I took off and headed for you. I hit the skies and, well, I saw you from the regions down south. Where is Fluttershy? Applejack smiled. Rainbow returned that with a frown. I don't know. I lost her 3 miles ago. Applejack laughed. Those were her friends, alright, and she loved every single one of them. She knew them so well, and she could always tell exactly how things were going to turn out. And the one that she knew least of all? Well, that was the whole new adventure, just waiting to happen. Rarity beamed. So, are you guys okay? Rainbow asked. They seemed to be far happier than she would have thought, having been stuck together in the desert for 3.5 days. We are just fine, Rainbow. We got a lot of luggage to ship out of here. But we're fine. Oh yes, and that nasty old cloud over there has been tormenting us to no end, Rarity chipped in. Same old Rarity, with her perfect hair and her made-up face. But she nodded that made-up face to Applejack. She looked back with a new kind of outlook. Rarity was who she was. In the end, they would talk about it in a bit more, and it was unfair for Applejack to completely strip Rarity of everything that made up who she was, where it counted. Besides, if Applejack had to tell the truth, under a less stressful situation, that playfully poisoned side of Rarity wasn't all that bad. It was a little alluring sometimes, and maybe Applejack could get used to it in small portions. But in the end, it was still Rarity on the inside whom she loved, and she was going to stand by her, to make sure that she never lost track again. Applejack leaned into Rarity for a moment, taking in a breath as her smile filled her mind. What's going on? Rainbow asked. Am I missing something here? We have a lot to tell you, Applejack said, and I have a lot I need to say. Rarity nodded humbly. But the two of us, Applejack mentioned cryptically, to an ever more confused Rainbow, giving her a wink and a smile. I think we're gonna be just fine.